Hey, okay. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Hello, hello, hello. Back. I don't know why the thing was muted. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, that means you have to do the whole thing. Of course. Of course you have to do the whole thing again. Okay, hang on. Let's go back to this one more time. Ordered my new book today, How a 25-Year-Old Learned He Wasn't the Only One to Go into Heaven. I talk about how discovering preterism in this book. I talked about how that all happened. I talked about the effect that it had on my faith. If you're familiar with the Church of Christ, I talked about working through some of those issues and coming to a better understanding of grace and whatnot. Hardback, not a big fan of how it turned out on Amazon. I don't know if it was my fault. I hired a dude to do it. I don't think it turned out all that great. That's okay. The paperback looks awesome. It's only like 11.74 or something. The audiobook is like a progressive thing. It's released like a podcast. It's $3 now, but as I release episodes, the collection will get more expensive. So if you purchase it earlier, you get better quality. Like you get more bang for your buck. And then there's a PDF download for $7. That's on my website, danielr.net/book. Okay, yeah, we did that again. So I've got a few things I can talk about tonight. Let me share some of that with you. Actually, I can just pull that up here, I think. I've got, let's see. Oh, there I am. I've got some resources. Let me show you this. Class handouts. So this isn't going to be too in-depth of stuff. Okay? It's just not. This is for a class at a congregation that's not as in-depth in eschatology as you guys are. So this isn't going to be like too earth-shattering stuff, but I still may think you might appreciate some of what's here. I've got outlines on Galatians, on the parables, on Malachi, and then I'm working on Hebrews. This is it's kind of what they look like here. Let me just show you that. So this is what the outlines look like. Again, it's nothing too groundbreaking. It's more for like a Sunday school, but you kind of get the picture. Parables are the same way. Malachi is a little bit more in-depth for you. There's even a video series on Malachi that goes along with it. And then Hebrews is going to be way more in-depth for sure. There's like a table of contents of what's coming. But I'll update this one throughout the week. So I only have through chapter 1 here. I do have chapter 2 notes posted, but I haven't they're not like fleshed out. They're just little bullet points, right? This is mainly for I just upload whatever I've got. So you don't really want to read past verse or page 10, but you can if you want to. That's Hebrews. So if anybody has any Bible questions, throw them out there. Otherwise, I have another plan. Let me see. Let me pull this up. Somebody sent me an article the other day that they asked if I could review. So there we go. Let me pull that up for you. There you are. This is by Stafford North. Did Jesus return in 70 AD? This is published on Oklahoma Christian University of Science and Arts. And so somebody asked me to look at this, so I might spend a few minutes doing this if nobody has any Bible questions. And now that you have sound, I think this might work a little bit better. Okay. Recently, he says, there's been a resurgence in the doctrine that Jesus' second and final return was in 70 AD. What's the date on this? Oh, it doesn't say. At the same time as the destruction of Jerusalem. This view holds that when Titus, the Roman general, brought his army to destroy Jerusalem, Jesus returned at that same time, ended the Jewish age, and established in a complete sense the Christian covenant. Looks like an emphasis here on specifically covenant eschatology, that version of full preterism. Those with this view also believe that the promised resurrection came at this time, but not as a bodily resurrection. What he means by that is a physical body resurrection. If the Bible teaches this view, even though it is contrary in so many ways to what most have believed over the years, it should be fully accepted. If, on the other hand, it is not in harmony, if it's not in harmony with plain and clear passages, it should be firmly, and completely rejected, no matter how sincere its advocates. It's pretty fair, I'd say. You have to understand, if you don't come from a Church of Christ background, you got to understand this paragraph. We don't care anything about. Typically, in the Churches of Christ, we don't really care much for church history. The idea is, and I don't fully buy into this now, but the idea is that the church was just totally apostate, like basically right out of the gate. right after the fall of Jerusalem, right after the first century. Shepherd of Hermes, all that stuff just completely off their rocker, basically, until not even the time of the Reformation, really, until the time of the American Restoration Movement in like the 1800s, Second Great Awakening. And so that's why he says, even if it is contrary to what so many have believed over the years, if you come from more of a Reformed background, more of a creedal background, you're going to have more of an emphasis and trust in a Bible, in tradition. But in the Churches of Christ, they don't really care much about that, because what do those guys know, basically? So anyways, that's what this paragraph's all about. This study will first give a brief statement of this belief, so the reader will know the basic elements of the view being studied, and we shall present 6 reasons why we reject this belief as out of harmony with scriptures. Okay, so basically he's going to summarize this, so we're going to skip down a little bit. Let's get down to, here we go. The 70 AD view is wrong because it makes figurative events the Bible intends literally. Thus, the corruptible body of 1 Corinthians 15 is said to be the fleshly or carnal system of Judaism, and the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 is the rise of Christianity. The world, or fleshly, is redefined to mean Jewish age, while spiritual refers to the Christian age. The old heavens and earth is Judaism, and the new heaven and the new earth are Christ's kingdom. Such meanings are not the interpretation which the passages where these terms are found would suggest. In fact, it does an injustice to the Christian system to suggest that it is the resurrection of dead Judaism. I don't really agree with that statement, like the way he's defining this. It is a resurrection of dead Judaism. While the law of Moses was the tutor to bring us to Christ, and while it had to die when the new system came, Christ's plan for redemption is not a resurrection of the law. I don't really understand what he's getting at here, and does not spring forth out of its death. The law was a preliminary measure to prepare the way for the plan God set in motion before the foundation of the world. I don't really, it's like I understand what he's saying up here, but when you get about down here, it's a resurrection of dead Judaism. I don't really see what he's getting at there, to be honest with you. We shall look in detail at 2 passages frequently cited by those holding the 70 AD view to see the error of this figurative or spiritualizing approach. Okay, one problem that I see with this personally already is that he says way up here. Let's see. He says, where did it go? I wish I had a highlighter. There's one. Never mind. That's a different thing. Okay. He says, if it's not in harmony with plain or clear passages. Notice that. If it's not in harmony with plain or clear passages. Who gets to decide what is plain or clear? Living 2,000 years as we are in the future, who gets to decide what's plain and clear? What's plain and clear to a 21st century mind, son or daughter of the Enlightenment, son or daughter of the Reformed tradition or the Church of Christ heritage, whatever. You don't get to decide what's plain and clear. Something might be like plain and clear to me. I think it's plain and clear, but I might be missing it totally, right? So we have to be careful, because when we start using language like this, we're already assuming a whole lot about ourselves and our ability to be able to tell from a translation what is plain and what is clear. Okay, so when you get down here, talking about the figurative or the spiritualizing approach, you're already starting to move into more of the semantics and not really the point of what preterism teaches. Now, okay, let's slow down for a second. Preterism starts with not the nature, but the time. Okay, hopping right into the meaty passages like 1 Corinthians 15 is a little bit of an injustice to the whole thing. It's sort of missing what preterists are even saying, because what you're saying is, okay, we have the time statements, And the time statements seem to say, even in 1 Corinthians 15, that the resurrection, that the judgment, that the second coming, that this whatever was soon, was at hand, would shortly come to pass. So if you're going to deal with covenant eschatology, you really need to start there, because that's where the issue is. The conclusion for the nature of the resurrection, of the kingdom, of the judgment, whatever, comes from a mind that is trying to honor the time texts. Unless you first deal with the time texts, there's no reason to talk about the nature, because you're not going to satisfy the preterist. Because the preterist is going to say, okay, hold on. Let me just mute this guy real quick. Because the preterist is going to say, okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying about the nature. Like, I've viewed the passage that way my entire life as well. The problem is, though, you're not honoring the time text, which is my real dilemma here. Okay, so getting into a discussion automatically about the nature of the resurrection body is already missing the point. I personally think. Okay, this is trying to get into the weeds instead of starting with dealing with what preterists actually teach. Another problem with this is that if you read preterist literature, like, for example, Don Preston, here we are on Don Preston's YouTube channel, then what you're going to find is that there's diversity within preterism about how to identify these passages, how to deal with these passages. For example, if you read Don Preston's book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, one of the very, very first things you're going to hit is, oh, there's this guy named Ed Stevens who believes that 1 Corinthians 15 is talking about the transformation of an individual body. So you can't even, if you're going to deal with preterism, you got to look at what both of those guys agree on. What do they both agree on is when the passages were written, that is, they were written before AD 70, and what the passages are concerned with, and that is the fall of Jerusalem. That's where you got to start. Skipping over all of that is missing the point of what preterists are trying to say. Preterists, as far as I'm concerned, freely admit 1 Corinthians 15 is a difficult passage. I mean, that's one of the last dominoes to fall. If you're studying eschatology, you can figure out, John 5, 28 and 29 and 2 Peter 3 and Revelation, whatever. All that comes pretty naturally. But 1 Corinthians 15, yeah, that's tough. Nobody's going to deny that. Don Preston did, 8,000 videos on it 3 or 4 years ago? If it was so easy, he would have done it in one video. But it takes time to undo the plain and clear stuff that we think is there. So already starting off with this, I think, isn't going to satisfy any preterists, okay? Now, we're going to skip down then a little bit and see what the second argument is. Because I think that, okay, it wasn't 8,000, Chris. I don't remember how many it was, but it was a lot of videos. A lot of videos. So he does cover 2 Peter 3 here. But see, does he point out, hang on. Will not taste death isn't in this passage. Hang on, what passage is that? 1 Corinthians 16. Go up a little bit. Okay, here we go. Verse 51. See, 1 Corinthians 15:51. Will not all sleep isn't even referenced in this. I don't really see how you can be. I don't really see how you can do an article on preterism and not cover that specific passage. Okay, let's get here. Number 2, 70 AD view is wrong because it is out of harmony. Oh, I know what you're saying, Chris. I was just joking back with you. It's wrong because it is out of harmony with the Bible teaching on Christ's second coming. Okay. Events said to occur with the second coming did not happen in AD 70. I wish you would say AD 70. If they did not, then whatever happened in 70 AD, it was not the second coming of the Lord. Below are listed passages, all would agree speak of Christ's second coming. Okay, notice this. All would agree speak of Christ's second coming. Those events are said to accompany his return and are underlined. As you read this list, ask yourself if you can believe that all of these or any of these happen in 70 AD. Okay, Matthew 16:27. First off, let's look at it because we should really look at the passage. For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will repay every man according to his deeds. Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. All right, now let's read his part. With his angels and shall reward every man according to his deeds. Hold on a second. He didn't put verse 28 in there. See, how do you cite this passage and not cite verse 28 too? Because that's the problem. That's what preterists are trying to get at. Is the very next passage says it's before some of those taste death. You can't write the article on it and not put that passage in there and claim to be fairly representing preterism. And I'm nothing against Stafford North at all. I'm sure he's a great Christian man. I mean, faculty at Oklahoma Christian, wrote a 28-page paper on scripture. I mean, he's trying to do this thing. I'm just pointing out my problems with it, okay? I'm not trying to be critical of him as a person whatsoever. Totally affirm his faith as far as I know him, okay? So don't get that, please. Is there any record of Jesus' return with his angels? Well, hold on a second. Now, okay, notice that Matthew 24 isn't anywhere here. Matthew 24 is nowhere there as a problem passage. He goes to Matthew 25, but he doesn't go to Matthew 24. Why? Because Matthew 24 says he'll send his angels with a great trumpet. They will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. And then he says this will take place in this generation. So, well, did he come with the angels? Were they gathered within that generation? Like, you can't, again, we're just picking and choosing. These are passages that everybody believes are going to take place at the second coming, as he says. And yet the same language that Brother North would probably agree apply to the fall of Jerusalem is used in this passage here. Okay, Matthew 25. There we have the angels again. He did not come with his angels. We already talked about that. He did not gather all people of all nations before him and judge him. All right, well, hang on a second. Let's go back to Luke. Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 21. Another account of the Olivet Discourse. He says, there will be signs in the sun and the moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations, and perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, men fainting with fear, and the expectation of the things that are coming upon the world, the inhabited world, for the powers of the heaven will be shaken. See, I don't see, again, something that has to do with the nations, with the whole inhabited earth, happened in AD 70, in a passage that Brother North probably agrees took place in AD 70. All right, Acts 1:11. Same Jesus which is taken up from you into heaven shall so come in like manner as you've seen him go into heaven. There is no record of a visible coming of the Lord in 70 AD. All right. But is the language not satisfied? Matthew 24:30. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. See, this is why you shouldn't just drop into a discussion of nature. Deal with the specific time text referenced by the preterists. We've already talked a little bit about 1 Corinthians 15. Philippians 3, that one you really have to get into chapter, all of Philippians to really get into. We're not going to get into that one right now. We're just going to touch on some of this. 1 Thessalonians, this is a good one. Let me show you a resource for this, though. DanielCRogers.gumroad.com, la-di-da. Paul's letters to the Thessalonians. I released this ebook for free. All you got to do is, it says name a fair price. You can put 0. That's the trick. And then you can go download this thing, PDF, for free to read yourself, because you really need to look at all of 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, before you conclusively say, like, if you don't realize that this is a quotation of Zechariah chapter 14, then you're probably going to miss what he's getting at in 1 Thessalonians 3. All right. Also, 1 Thessalonians 4, you really need to do an in-depth comparative study of this and the Olivet Discourse to give it a fair treatment. Same thing with 2 Thessalonians 1:10. I mean, this really requires a study of martyr vindication and think about what the thlipsis, the pressure is in this passages. All right. A lot of this is just assuming the nature. Obviously, this didn't happen in 80/70. Obviously, this didn't happen in 80/70. So you have to take some of that with a grain of salt there. Okay. Let's look at this point B, though. The New Testament gives clear indications that the return of Christ would not be as early as 80/70. Let's see. When some of the first century began to be too specific about the time of Christ's return, they were rebuked by apostolic authority. Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians 2:2 that the Thessalonians should not think that the event is just at hand. See, again, this statement here is based on a particular translation of 2 Thessalonians 2. If you look at it in the New American Standard, he does say to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So even this statement here is based off of a suspect translation of 2 Thessalonians 2:2. All right. Let's see. 2 Peter is probably written about 66 or 67. That's a pretty suspect argument as well. Just arguing it based off the dating of the books is not going to really prove anything because there's different opinions on that all over the place. See, virtually all scholars date, but not every scholar dates. And narrow is the way, right? No, just kidding. Still, these kind of arguments aren't based on any conclusive biblical evidence. We said that he said up here at the very top that if the Bible teaches something, and now we're getting out of what the Bible teaches, now we're getting into when books are written and all this kind of stuff. And this doesn't have anything to do with what Scripture says. It's just not treating it fairly. There's a better explanation of the passages they say require first century coming. See, this probably should have been the first point. Okay. All right, we must admit that there was a coming in 80/70, or the inspired writers were wrong. All right, this is getting better. Okay, Philippians 4:5 as the first example, talking about epistemic distance, is really an interesting choice for a first example. In this passage, Paul says to rejoice and let your forbearance be known unto all men because the Lord is at hand. Note first that Paul did not say that the Lord's coming is at hand, only that he is near. This can mean either time or space. Yeah, but see, starting with this passage is really just a little bit misleading because there's so many more passages. I don't think I've even, maybe I have heard of a preterist use this passage, but very rarely do you see this passage used. The first one that you would use is James 5:8 and 9, like guaranteed James 5:8 and 9, or the one quoted by Chris a moment ago, Matthew 10, that talked about you'll not go through all the towns in Jerusalem before the Son of Man comes. Okay, Matthew 26, let's look at this. Jesus is being tried before the Jewish high priest, who asked Jesus if he is the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus answers the affirmative and then adds, you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Here Jesus tells the high priest that he will see him both sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. The most obvious question is how the high priest could see Jesus sitting at the right hand of power, obviously a reference to him being seated at the right hand of God. Ooh, boy, this is a big section. Let's see, hang on a second. Oh, he says, since we have no record of the first, we ask whether some event could have demonstrated that Jesus was seated at God's right hand. Look at this. So, he says that, okay, hang on. Let's slow down because this is actually a pretty good point right here. All right, so Jesus says that you would see him sitting at the right hand of the hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. He says there's two ways this could have been fulfilled. Number one is the high priest would have been given a similar miracle to the one given Stephen. That is, his eyes would be open. He would see the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Or, notice this, the high priest and others present would see some event which would demonstrate that Jesus was seated at the right hand of power. Look at that. So you can fulfill that prophecy. You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power through an event that demonstrates that power. But that's not possible in Acts chapter 1 or other passages that have been cited. That's interesting. Since we have no record of the first, we ask that whether some event could have demonstrated that Jesus was seated at God's right hand. The answer would seem to be that his prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem could well have been the demonstration Jesus had in mind. After all, it's just a few days earlier that he predicted the fall of Jerusalem. So the destruction of Jerusalem, in exact fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy, showed that he was sitting at the right hand of God. If you say this, you're just giving away the whole thing, are you not? How are you not giving away the other passages if you admit this? But what of the second part of the statement? The phrase coming on the clouds is interesting. It's used figuratively about destroying Egypt. It's used in Daniel 7:13. And he thinks this is talking about the ascension. 3 times the New Testament does the expression coming on the clouds appear. Matthew 24:30 says that'll be studied later, okay? The passage we're considering about the high priest, and Revelation 1:7. Many passages in the New Testament speak of Jesus as coming, but only these speak of Jesus as coming on the clouds. What's going on here, basically? Okay. He says, Jesus thus says to the high priest and those standing by, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power when you recognize that the destruction of Jerusalem comes as I've predicted publicly, and at the same time you'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. What? Oh man, these things happen at the same time. So he admits that this is talking about the other 2 New Testament uses of coming on the clouds also speak of coming in a special sense, to carry out a predicted destruction and not to come in physical presence. Well, then what about Acts chapter 1, where he says that he's went to heaven on the clouds and he's coming again on the clouds? Is that not the same idea there? And would that not be a direct allusion to Daniel 7:13 and 14 that he mentioned a second ago as being the source text for this idea? That's just so interesting. So interesting. Okay, we're gonna skip this 1 John 2:18 one, 1 Peter 4:7. He says the view cannot be that 1 Peter 4:7 cannot be referring to the fall of Jerusalem. It does not qualify as being broad-scaled enough to be called the end of all things. Surely some event of a wider significance must be in Peter's mind. Another option is that Peter is saying that Christians should live good lives because the end of all things is imminent. At hand could be taken in the sense that it might happen at any moment. I don't really buy that one. A third possibility is he could be speaking for the end of each one individually. I don't really see that either. But the end of all things, for the Jewish people to whom Peter's writing, it makes sense for that to be the fall of Jerusalem. Okay, I guess he's trying to argue for the elasticity of time here, and this could be a personal sort of thing, but that doesn't really qualify as the end of all things either. That doesn't make much sense there. Okay, skip Hebrews 10:37. Here we go. James 5:8. All right. The whole thrust of this passage is for Christians to be patient, to endure because Christ's coming is near. This passage could mean, don't give up now because Christ's return will be in a short time. Be patient because Christ's return is always at hand. That doesn't really fit, in my opinion. Be faithful because the destruction of Jerusalem, but not the second coming, will soon happen, and that will give you relief from some of the trials you're under. Since either the second or third options are possible, we are not forced to accept, on the basis of this passage, a first century coming. But why would this even be possible? Is there proof that this is referring to something that would just happen at any moment? Does that not sort of rob those words of their meaning? Okay, let's get on to the next bit here. Harlot of Revelation. This is probably going to be based off of some kind of argument on the date anyways. Jesus did completely establish his new covenant before AD 70. Okay, so here he's denying a 40-year transition period. All right, that's okay. You don't really have time to get into all that right now anyways. Because the resurrection of the dead, he already made this point. Let's go down to verse 6. It is not correctly used Matthew 24 and 25. Okay. All right. this is a big discussion here, but basically he's going to be arguing that this is going to be destruction of Jerusalem up to Matthew chapter 24 verse 34, but it's not the same thing that's being discussed at the end of chapter 24 towards the end of chapter 25. All right. So he's arguing for a divided Matthew 24 and 25 here, but that's not really tenable because because Luke chapter 17 shows that both sides of Matthew 24 are in fact talking about the same thing. So I see what he's going to do here, and so we're going to keep on moving because we've already kind of covered that to some extent. All right. Okay, that's basically it for the article. We didn't read every word, but we got the gist of it, I think. My wife just texted me and said that she's not feeling all too well, so I need to go and help her out. Otherwise, we'd have looked through this a little bit more in detail, but she says that she is a little nauseous, so I really need to go help her out. And anyways, thanks for joining me for this sort of random episode of Two Guys in the Bible. If you want to read this article, I'll post it in the chat. You can give your own critique of it. I appreciate Stafford North putting forth the effort and writing this article. I just feel that he started it off a little bit on the wrong foot and didn't prove that at hand can just be possibly any old time. I just felt like that was a little bit weak. I wish you'd have done a little bit more effort in proving that and not starting off with an argument on the nature, because that's not what preterists are primarily concerned with. We start with the time and then we talk about the nature because of what the time statements really seem to be saying, and we're trying to be true to those and admit that we might possibly be misunderstanding the nature statements in light of what appears to be very clear time statements. Anyways, I'm gonna go help out Laura. Y'all have a good night,